The first thing Renee felt was heat. Then, the sharp scent of something burning, wires, cloth, maybe her memory. She blinked, slowly. The sky above her spun with lavender clouds, and beyond them hung two suns, twins in silent descent. She didn't know their names, but she knew they weren't Earth's. Her helmet was cracked. She touched the seam and flinched. Blood. Not much. Just enough to remind her that she was alive. Status, she whispered, expecting her suit to respond. It didn't. No lights. No hum. Just quiet. She sat up. The ground was red sand and twisted metal, the remains of the Terra Nova Scout shuttle scattered across 100 meters of alien stone. Her science pod was half buried, its hatch blown open like the mouth of a dying animal. Inside it, no movement. Just plants, samples she'd collected before the impact. The thought brought her mind into sharp focus. She'd been cataloging native flora from orbit. Not fighting. Not fleeing. Just learning. And now she was here. Solith, she whispered, remembering the name of the planet below their mission logs. Classified uninhabitable. Then why was she breathing? She climbed to her feet, knees aching, ribs sore. Every breath felt like swallowing needles. But she moved, and that was something. Her training told her she should stay by the wreck. Signal for help. Conserve energy. But her gut said something else. There was something here. And it was calling. By the third day, Renee had made shelter from broken plating and parachute silk. The nights were colder than she imagined. 2 moons watched from the sky, and the stars blinked unfamiliar constellations. Sometimes she thought she saw shapes moving near the rocks, slender, tall, watching, but when she turned, there was nothing. She told herself it was fatigue. The food rations would last a few weeks. The water recycler, somehow, still worked. And the flora pod, miraculously intact, kept enough green life inside to make her believe in luck, or maybe mercy. But something strange began to happen. The plants she brought down, Terran moss, hybrid vines, oxygen root ferns, started growing outside the pod. In the soil of Solith. Thriving. On a planet marked sterile by all human scans. This isn't right, she whispered one evening, kneeling beside the ferns now rooted in crimson sand. This should be impossible. They shimmered under starlight. Faintly. Subtly. Like they were listening. Or remembering. On the 8th day, she followed the sound. It began as a hum, buried beneath the wind. Not mechanical. Not natural. Almost like singing, but not from a mouth. From the earth. A resonance low and slow like a heartbeat beneath her feet. She followed it past the ridge, through tall stones marked by time. Her boots kicked up dust that sparkled faintly in the light. Once, she reached out and touched one of the stones, and felt warmth, like skin holding old heat. Then she saw them. The ruins. Half sunken in the sand, the bones of something ancient. Not metal. Not stone. Something in between. Columns with carvings that bent in impossible directions. Glyphs that shimmered when she looked too long. But more than that, presence. Like the walls remembered being alive. And in the center of it all, a massive ring. 10 meters wide, made of black stone veined with gold. A circle broken in two, cracked clean down the middle as if by a single, purposeful strike. She stepped toward it. Her hand brushed the edge. And the ground pulsed beneath her. She stumbled back, breath caught in her throat. She wasn't alone. That night, the dreams began. Not hers. Not truly. Someone else's. A voice, not spoken but felt, like memory played through feeling. A tall figure standing under twin moons. Long hands reaching toward a flower glowing in the dark. Whispers in a language she didn't know, but somehow understood. Return the green. She woke with sweat soaking her shirt. Her breathing ragged. And in the distance, where the ruins slept, a faint light had returned to the broken ring. On the 10th day, she saw him. At first just a shape. Tall. Cloaked in shifting cloth that moved like mist. Skin the color of burnt copper. No visible eyes, but she felt his gaze like heat on her neck. He didn't speak. Just watched. She didn't run. She should have. Instead, she whispered, "Who are you?" No answer. But the wind shifted. And when she looked again, he was gone. But not far. Never far. On the 12th night, the glyphs on the ruins glowed. Reneve returned, drawn without logic or reason. The plants in her shelter had begun to hum, just like the stones. Her own heart beat in time with the strange rhythm that filled the air. And in the center of the circle stood the figure. Not cloaked now. Bare-skinned, tall and lithe, limbs too long to be human but not monstrous. Eyes like liquid onyx, full of sorrow and fire. He spoke. Not in words. But her mind understood. You are not the first. She stepped forward. You can speak. A slow nod. And then, you dreamed what was lost. Her throat tightened. You mean, the ruins? His head tilted. The ruin is in us all. She didn't know why she cried then. Maybe it was his voice, like wind over grave-marked stones. Or maybe it was the way he stood, not threatening, just tired. Like her. They met again the next night. And the next. Each time she brought something from her world, music, a dried flower, her own voice reading from journals. And each time he listened. His name was severe. A word that meant root that waits, in his tongue. She liked the way it felt on her lips. And he liked the way her laugh sounded when she stumbled over his words. He told her of the Ilari, his people, once rulers of the stars, now scattered, hunted, broken by wars they didn't start. He was a healer, once. Then a traitor, for refusing to weaponize the living. She said, I'm just a botanist. He touched her hand. It burned. Then you are a healer, too. They began to dream together. His memories. Her past. Entangled, slow, deliberate. In the dream world beneath the ruins, they sat side by side beneath the twin moons, watching ghost flowers bloom across dead stone. He sang to her, once. A sound like stars blooming. And in return, she whispered, I think I'm falling in love with you. He didn't answer. But his hand found hers. And held it. And in silence, they became something more than survivor and shadow. Then came the fire in the sky. A ship. Human. Not hers. Not rescue. Claim. And suddenly, she knew what was coming. When the stars fell, he did not look up. Not at first. His hands were in the soil, ancient, aching, thirsty soil that still remembered what it once was, alive. He pressed his fingers deeper into the roots of the fern that now thrived beneath the red sand. Her fern. Her gift. Its leaves pulsed faintly with green, the kind of green he hadn't seen since the high valleys of Adareth. Long gone. You do not belong here, he whispered. But the plant remained. Stubborn. Soft. Thriving in silence. Like her. He had seen her crash. Seen the sky burn open like a wound and the shuttle streak across the sky, trailing smoke and fire and pieces of broken metal. He thought it was a machine at first, another drone from the exiles or the skyscars. But it was her. A woman, alone. Broken in the way only survivors are. And beautiful, not in the symmetry of her face, but in the grit that clung to her like dust. She didn't cry when the ship didn't answer. She built. She planted. She wandered. She sang, sometimes. He didn't understand the words, but her voice was wind over glass, soft and lonely and true. And so he stayed in the shadows. Watched her from the high stones. Listened to her heart. And in doing so, something inside him, something long quiet, stirred. His name was Severe, once Svyar, son of Ilmatar and bearer of the root sigil. His people, the Ilari, called him a traitor. Not because he fled war, but because he refused to make war out of life. His crime was silence. His punishment was exile. He hadn't spoken in 200 cycles. Not in the way the Ilari did. But she broke that. With her eyes. With the way she looked at ruins like they weren't dead. The first time he stepped into the open, he thought she would scream. She didn't. Instead, she tilted her head, blinking like a child seeing lightning for the first time. "Who are you?" she had asked. And he wanted to say, "I don't know anymore." But he gave her the only truth he had. "You are not the first." And it was enough. They spoke in pieces. In dreams. In memory. He showed her the shape of his sorrow, the great cities that once floated above oceans, the cradles of light now cracked and buried under ash. The Ilari had grown too fast, seeded stars too recklessly. They tried to become gods. And when they couldn't, they became monsters instead. War broke them. Then remade them. And when he refused to lace fire into the veins of living roots, they cut his name from the archives. "I couldn't save them," he told her one night as they sat in the middle of the ring. She pressed her fingers to the gold-veined stone and said, "Maybe they didn't need saving. They died screaming. Maybe they needed to be remembered instead." She said things like that. Quiet. Pointed. Words like keys. Each one unlocking doors he'd sealed long ago. He began to feel again. Not just the breath of the ruins or the hum of the glyphs, but the pull of her. It was in her laugh, crooked, surprised, shy. In her stubbornness, refusing to give up when the stars had turned their backs. In the way she trusted. Not because he earned it. But because he hadn't hurt her yet. He didn't deserve that. But he wanted to. One night, under twin moons, she said, "I think I'm falling in love with you." And he didn't speak. Not because he didn't feel it. But because he felt it too much. Like blood waking up after a wound. Like breath after drowning. And the fear in him, old and bone deep, whispered, "What if you break her too?" So he held her hand instead. And that was the beginning. He began planting her seeds in the soil around the ruins. Carefully. Tenderly. The Ilari taught their children that to place life into the soil was an act of worship. He hadn't prayed in centuries. But for her, he tried. Then the sky changed. A ship. Not hers. Not like hers. Military. Sleek. Sharp. Humming with the sound of intent. Not rescue. Not exploration. Claiming. He felt it in the soil before he saw the streak of silver above the horizon. The roots recoiled. The glyphs in the stones flickered, as if remembering trauma. He turned to the circle and pressed his hand to the stone. "They are coming," he whispered. Behind him, the wind shifted. And she stood there. Hair tangled. Eyes wide. A dried flower still braided into her sleeve. She had seen it too. "They're not here for me," she said. He looked at her and nodded. "They are here for what I am." Her breath caught. "You think they know?" "They always knew." He told her everything that night. How the Ilari were taken by the human directive in the final years of the fall. How their biology was used, twisted, into bioengineering for colonization projects. How the living archives were raided, turned into weapons. How his people's legacy became myth. Then threat. And how, in the ruins of his home, all that was left of the Ilari was him. And the seed he carried in his blood. "I'm not supposed to exist," he said. Reneve knelt beside him. Touched his face. And said, "Maybe you exist because you're the one who was meant to remember." They kissed for the first time that night. Slow. Not burning. Not desperate. Just real. Like two broken things choosing not to cut each other. The next morning, the ship came closer. And the ruins stopped humming. It felt like the world was holding its breath. Severe stood alone at the edge of the circle, watching the dust trail in the sky, and thought, this is where the story ends. But then she came to him. And said, let's write a new one. That night, he gave her his true name. Not the one his people branded him with, but the one his mother whispered in the song of first breath. Sevirilian. The seed that sings. And she whispered hers in return. Renee. The one who stayed. He didn't want to lose her. But he would not run. Not again. Not from love. He stood before the ruins and placed his hand on the glyphs. Wake, he said. And the stones began to glow. Light crawled up the broken columns. Roots pulsed in the soil. And deep beneath, where the bones of the past slept, something stirred. A chorus of voices, long silent, rose. Not to fight. But to remember. The soil was ready. The seeds were waiting. And Severe, no longer alone, sang. He never liked descending onto quiet planets. No signals. No chatter. No cities. Just void and wind. The kind of silence that felt like being swallowed. Solith was that kind of planet. His NAV system called it unstable. His instincts called it lonely. Still, he landed. Because of her. Not by name. Not yet. But the distress beacon he'd caught near the asteroid belt wasn't on any registry. Just a ghost of a signal, buried in static, until he ran it through an old decryption loop, and it sang back with a code he hadn't heard in 6 years. Renee, 11, status unknown. He stopped breathing for 6 seconds. And then he changed course. He hadn't seen Renee since Terrafield Base collapsed under its own politics. He was security. She was science. She'd once called him dangerously thoughtful. He thought of her like a heartbeat, always there, even when he was looking away. They shared coffee. Arguments. A single kiss under a skylight while the rain drowned everything else. Then she left. Not out of anger. Just belief. There's more than what they let us see, she told him. And now here he was, following her ghost to a dying world. He touched down just outside the valley. No signs of life. No wreckage. No bones. Just wind whispering through cracked stone. He slung his rifle over his back and scanned for the signal. Stronger. It was moving. Not an echo. A person. Noel found her on the edge of a cliff. She was different. Hair longer. Back straighter. Scars across her jaw. But it was her. And she was smiling. At someone else. Not him. He didn't step forward. Not yet. Just watched from the high ridge. She stood beside a figure too tall to be human, cloaked in sun-dappled skin and impossible calm. Their hands touched briefly. Not out of need. But choice. And something in Noel's chest, something old and half-dead, tightened. They went back to the ruins. He followed. Not like a spy. More like a ghost. When he saw them again, they were laughing. She touched the alien's face with her fingertips. And he, whoever he was, glowed. Not just metaphorically. Light, gold and soft, shivered under his skin. And the ruins around them pulsed in response. Noel had seen bioluminescent neural fields before, on Deridian tech corpses, on failed cloning beds. But this wasn't tech. This was memory. Living memory. And somehow, Renee was inside it. He should have left. But he couldn't. On the third night, he made himself seen. Not dramatically. Just, there. Torchlight. Footfalls. The kind of presence you can't fake. He stepped into the stone circle and said her name. Renee. She froze. Then turned. And her eyes widened. Noel. And that was all. No embrace. No anger. Just the weight of everything unsaid between them. Later, around a makeshift fire, he sat across from her. The alien, severe, she called him, kept his distance. But never let Renee out of his gaze. It wasn't hostile. It was protective. Fiercely. Noel saw it for what it was. Love. And it wasn't his. You're supposed to be dead, he said, sipping recycled water. I was, she said softly. Then I met him. She didn't explain more. Didn't need to. Noel looked into the fire. And is he, safe? He's more than that, she said. He remembers things even history forgot. And you trust him? She didn't answer with words. She reached across and touched Severe's arm. And the light came again. Gentle. Unafraid. Noel stayed 5 days. Not because he thought he could win her back. But because the ruins were singing. And the glyphs, ancient Ilari memory stones, recognized his DNA. That made no sense. But neither did the way the stone beneath his boot vibrated when he got too close to Severe. One night, he pressed his palm to a broken column. It lit up blue. And he saw a vision. A child. Floating in glass. A machine whispering his name. And a woman, Renee, reading from a journal beside the tank. He woke screaming. Renee came to him in the morning. You're not just a salvager, she said. He looked at her. Tired. Shaken. Raw. What am I then? You're like me, she said. And him? Maybe not exactly. But close enough that the ruins remember you, too. He didn't answer. Just looked at the horizon. That day, a shadow passed over the sun. A ship. Not Noel's. Not a salvager. Military. Renee turned to Severe. They're coming. He nodded once. Noel rose. They'll kill him. Renee looked at him, eyes soft, but resolute. Not if we tell them the truth. He laughed once. Since when has that ever worked? But then he saw the firelight in Severe's chest. Saw Renee's fingers interlace with his. And he didn't feel jealousy. He felt hope. And that scared him more than anything. He could have flown off. Let history repeat itself. But instead, Noel lifted his comm array and transmitted a message to the incoming ship. This is Salvager Unit 12. I've found survivors. 1 human. 1 unknown. They're not hostile. They're alive. And they have names. You owe it to them to listen. He sat beside the ruins that night. Listening to Renee read a story from her tattered journal. Her voice was calm. Severe's hand was in hers. And Noel? He just closed his eyes. And remembered what it felt like to be home.